And of course, Kevin's dog has to show up, but it looks like we are live. And it looks like we are good to go, Jim.
Well, welcome everybody. I do appreciate you coming this evening. I hope you enjoy it. Hope you'll tell your friends about us and come back often. We are on Zoom, but we also have live streaming on YouTube. So anybody on YouTube that's watching us tonight, welcome. I want to talk a minute about our second train show, November the 21st at 1 p.m. I'm really pleased about the way that it's being received. The invitations that we sent out are being responded to, and that's nice. So I'm happy about that. Everything is going along smoothly at this point. We'll be contacting all the vendors shortly and trying to make sure that they have everything that they need and understand how to participate and when they'll be involved and so forth. So if you know anybody that might be available on November the 21st at 1 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern time, I hope you'll tell them to join us and to come to the train show. If any of you are new tonight, I hope you'll give Dylan your email address and your name and what scale you model. And he'll send out an email to you in the future so that you're aware of all the different shows that we do. Our next My Bill with Chris Kuntz as the moderator is October the 14th. I hope you'll remember that date and bring a model to show and to talk to us about and to share with us. We're looking forward to seeing what you all are modeling. Our featured modeler tonight is Mad Dog Dylan Lambert. He owns Lambert Locomotive Works and just got back or in the process of trying to get home from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, where they had an open house sponsored by Kevin Macomber and Al Judy. Since they couldn't put on a show this year, this was their alternative, I guess, and asked some ON30 modelers to join them. And Dylan was one of those that made the trip, and hopefully he'll tell us a little bit about how that went. So Dylan, welcome, and I'll turn it over to you, sir.
All righty. Thank you, Jim. So first things first, the open house. I didn't realize that it was running until tomorrow, and I'm leaving tomorrow morning, so I kind of feel like a bit of a jerk. I'm going to apologize in advance for that. That said, we probably had about 20 people show up here at Kevin's today. From across Pennsylvania. Some people came from West Virginia. We had one guy come up from near Boston and came down to join us. And there was a lot of, basically, it's not a train show because you can't have a show. But it's basically, hey guys, how you doing? Sit back, relax, let's talk. It was good to see a lot of these guys because a lot of these guys I know because I've met them because I'm a manufacturer, and they're very nice people and they've been very good to me. People who've given me advice freely, have big customers of mine. It was good to see them again because frankly, I'm suffering a little bit of train show neglect. This may not be a show, but it was the next best thing that we could get, and I could actually see some people. Because a lot of these people I only see at the shows, and I'll be honest with you, I kind of miss them because sometimes, like today, I had some people giving me some good ideas on what we could do for a project. I'm not going to get into it just yet because I need to actually draw it up, from, the sketches that was given to me. But it's something that ON30 could use and O-Scale could use, for that era. And, when the time comes, I'll get more in detail to it once I have, prototype designed at least. A lot of stuff to design with it, a boiler, a body work, stuff like that. I know I'm being purposely vague, and I know some of you are probably going, just tell us what it is. Well, I want to actually have something to show you first. Other than here's a piece of paper and here's the sketches that person A drew up based on his measurements, and and here's the sheet with the dimensions for O-Scale and where they all fit in. And I want to have something to actually show you guys. So on that front, I'm going to kind of shove that over there. That said, like I said, seeing a lot of these people was good. A good friend of mine, Rick Bell, came down. He lives in Pennsylvania now. Seeing him was good because he moved to Pennsylvania and then he had a heart attack. And I'm like, well, crud. This is the first time I usually see him once a year, but I talk to him a lot. And, that was good to see him too, because, he's one of those guys that I enjoy being around immensely. He is, I'm spoiler alert, he does do work for me, but he's just a good person. A lot of the people I work with are just good people. And primarily that's why I work with them. I know you, I trust you, and, that's part of the deal. You've shown some faith in me. Rick is one of those early adopters of me, as I like to put it. And like I said, seeing him again was pretty good. I know a lot of them are at dinner right now, which I did not find out about until about 2 hours ago. And I'm like, well, I have to be here. Bring me home some leftovers or something. I don't know. I wanted to make sure I told you guys what was going on. There is going to be people showing up tomorrow. Unfortunately, I am going to be driving home. Admittedly, I never thought to ask, hey, what days are this? Because the track record with the shows has always been a Friday, Saturday thing, because usually the shows are held at a church. I never thought to ask, hey, are we doing this Sunday? So like I said, I feel kind of like a jerk because I'm going home because I have to work Monday. So I'm like, crud. I could have come down Friday and, it is what it is. That said, I can't complain about my time here. One of Kevin's kids, Tim, is an excellent cook. That's what he does by trade. So other than tonight where nobody was around, I've eaten very well. Even beef stew, and I'm not a stew guy, and he just perfect. If you ever meet the kid, you'll know, you'll be able, and you eat his food. Oh man, you're gonna want to adopt the kid. He's that good of a cook. As for stuff that's going on, the big thing right now is the junkyard dog. I am basically on the cusp of sending those out to the pre-order customers. However, there was something I noticed when I built the prototype yesterday, and I'm like, you know what? I need a ladder for the cab, and I actually have a ladder that I already designed that could work. So I just ordered up a bunch of those to throw in with it so you can fix it and you can actually get into your cab, because otherwise you're jumping, and I don't think even Batman could jump that high. It's a pretty high leap, to be fair. But let me pull up the picture to show you guys. So this is basically the junkyard dog as I built it. I did it fast, dirty, and basically just to show people how it goes together, because the point of my instructions was I want to show people before and after pictures of how it goes together. And that's each step in the process. There were 2 pictures that I did not notice at the time that came out like crap, so I can't use them. They're all blurry and I didn't even notice because I just took the picture. I'm like, okay, let's move on to the next step. I just hit the button on my phone and moved on. So 2 pictures aren't going to be usable, but I still have enough photos to make it work. Like I said, the point is to show people the step-by-step process. That is basically what this engine is. I don't have any filler in the cracks to clean up the seams. Eventually, I'll probably do that. But the point of this was to show people how it goes together. That was the point of this engine. So I can make sure people understood it and would be successful with it. That was my goal. I think once I started writing the instructions earlier, I need to start loading in the pictures, and that's probably going to be a tomorrow, Monday project. But the idea is, again, show people a step-by-step process of how it goes together. Kind of like what I did with the Salvation Repower kits on building that unit once you have all your parts together. I do know on those, now that I bring it up, I'm just waiting on the shims to show up. What do I mean by that? So I had 2 people come to me saying, hey, we've got a bit of an issue. The frame is impinging on some detail on the underside of the body, and part of it is flexing away and the gear's kind of slipping. I'm like, okay, that's not going to do. So what I did is I just had some shims laser cut, and what we're going to do is you just put that between the rail truck frame and the mechanism or the repower kit, and you just screw it into place. And in theory, that gives you a flat surface that you're mounting it to, so it's not going to bend. I only got that report from 2 people, though. Even my own test build didn't show that, which makes me a little bit annoyed because I'm like, well, if it had showed me that, then I could have had the shims made ahead of time. So it makes me feel a little bit silly. Because my goal is to have everything done and ready to go ahead of time. I have had people already build them, and from what I can tell, they've been successful. I've had one person that said, hey, the motor was dead out of the box, and I just sent them a new one. But for the most part, I have not gotten many reports back of issues, which is good. I'm a little bit annoyed about the shim thing because, I could have caught that myself, but for whatever reason, the one I mounted and tested on a frame, all I did is I mounted an assembled unit and I just tested the leads, just ran it right through a 9-volt battery, and it ran. That is what I would call an oops, and I'm sorry. Would rather ask for forgiveness now than say, and say it's my screw up. Because like I said, I didn't catch it. I didn't catch it as a problem when I built the test units. The test units, I built one purposely to destroy it, to figure out how it would break. Like if you try to fix the motor and you try to slide it around, what's going to happen if you Loctite it in place and, oh, whoops, the Loctite dries, what's going to happen? One of the motors is going to break. The second one, I accidentally damaged a tooth on one of the gears. So it had a little bit of a whine when it ran. You could hear it. Just because, again, one of the teeth was damaged, so it was kind of meshing around funky. Still ran smooth, but it had a noise to it. The third one, honestly, didn't have any noise at all. It just ran. So a little bit annoyed with that because, like I said, that's something I could have caught if, for whatever reason, the stars aligned, but in my case, they didn't. I am not afraid of saying, hey, I was a little bit unlucky and that problem escaped me. Because like I said, on my tests, it worked. Junkyard dog, though, like I said, that is the big thing. Let me just hop screens here. You guys will probably be...
Dylan, yep. Before you leave that, you talk about filling in the gaps. What are you talking about, and what do you use as filler?
Usually I just use, you can use either squadron putty. Testers makes a contour putty, which I really like because it's thinner and it's easier to get in the cracks. And then you just, clean it up with a little bit of sandpaper and it's just nice and flush. You can tell where the seams are, but once you paint it, you really can't. Which eventually that model is going to be painted and detailed, or at least more than it already is anyway. Mm-hmm. You were asking something, Bill?
Dylan, what I use is Bondo spot putty. Buy it at Walmart. It's like a red tone, but
I hadn't even thought of using Bondo, to be honest with you.
And not the actual Bondo, this little spot pad, little tube thing.
Okay, I think I know what you're talking about. Just used for little stuff, right?
Yeah, it's for like when you've done a patch on a car and you got some little nicks you want to fill in. That's what it's for, but it works out really great for models.
Okay, I'll have to try it out.
It's shelf life.
Yeah. Is that easy to sand, Bill?
But yeah. It's just like Squadron, but it has a better shelf life and it's a little finer.
Oh, okay.
But in the meantime, while Bill is here, you guys have already seen it, but the people on the live stream, for the record, let's show it to you guys. This is, spoiler alert, I sent one of the kits that I built or had made. I sent it to Bill Davis, who is with us tonight. Basically, so I could have test builds done. I did like 5 kits or 5 or 6 kits. I'd like to say 5 because I built number 6, I think. I don't know. I'm losing track because it's been a long day. So point is, Bill was one of the people who did a test build for me. And this is how his came out. His is ON3, not ON30, but it is still a spectacular model. And that's the point of these builds, was to identify problems and that I would need to correct. That was the goal. Suffice to say, I think that has been successful, because I will fully admit that I screwed this up, because if you don't admit your mistakes, what are you doing? You see these hoods right here? You see how towards the back, there's about a door size space between the last door and the cab. Well, I kind of screwed that up. You see, I don't know how I screwed up when I measured it. I just know that I screwed up when I measured it, and it was about a door's length too short. That is another thing we call a whoops, but the simple solution was to just have the panels laser cut. In the future kits, they're all going to be resin cast. I've already sent a set of panels over to my casting guy, so we can fix that. Those in theory show up Monday, so that way he can at least fix that mold and get it all tweaked and all that jazz. That's the big thing. There's some details on here that Bill actually influenced the creation of the Junkyard Dog, or the modifications I made to it. So if you look here, you see these little angled straps or supports that kind of go out and hold the deck up. Well, as it turns out, what I thought were footboard stanchions were actually supports that were meant to go straight up from the side frame and fill in up towards the bottom of the deck. Well, I saw when Bill was doing his build and he sent me pictures of it, he sent me a picture, and well, there's these angled brackets, because at the time I didn't think anything of it. And he sent me those. I'm pretty sure he's one of the two people who told me, hey, we're missing something here. But he's the one who did the angle brackets. And I'm like, you know what? That looks a lot better because it's different. It's unique. It stands out. So I had him draw up the measurements. I drew them up on my own and had a raft and had a little part printed up, and that was cheap. It was cheap money to have those made. So the good news is I could probably also use those as a scratch building part if somebody ever needs them. But let me go over right quick and I will show you what I was working. Let me go back to here. And you can see on my model, you can see there's the brackets. All I did is I just put the sprue right on the back of the face that's kind of angled away from the body. So it's not like if you cut it off with some flush cutters and there's a little bit left, it's not going to hurt anything. But you mount those, you just glue them on, you're good to go. The sandboxes, I just fixed right to the side frames on mine. You can kind of position them however you want, as long as they line up by the wheels. I just did them closer to the side because, that's what I felt worked. Not to say you can't do something else that'll work. You can mount them farther out and put wire in. I wanted them to be closer to the wheels though, so that's why I did that on mine. The gen set in here, I don't have a good picture of it, but on Tom's kits, you could use like a lifelike generator in HO scale, and that would be your motor. Well, I kind of said, to hell with that, because one, you're buying it from me. I am going to make sure you have what you need to build this in its entirety. So I actually designed a motor unit or a generator unit to fit in that hood. A friend of mine, Aaron Loyette, was kind enough to loan me one that I can measure. So I knew roughly what size I needed to make it, because at the time when I designed it, I did not yet have the Junkyard Dog here, so I could build one and see what I had for space. Good news is I could probably extend that generator a bit. Hold on just a sec. It's just Brady. I'm sorry about that. Here at Judy Macomber, we have a vicious guard dog, which really, I don't know. I don't think he does much guarding, to be frank. But I designed a motor that would fit in there based off of the dimensions of one of the old lifelike ones, just so you have a rough footprint. And I just built it from there using pictures of a Caterpillar diesel that my brother had taken. Just a 6-cylinder, basically just built it myself. It's not based off of any specific prototype, but in the hood, it's going to look the part, and that's the point. You want it to look the part. The exhaust stack was the most recent part I built. Basically, it is just look at it as a muffler, for lack of a better way of putting it, that you just glue onto the top of the hood, and right above where one of the exhaust ports is. What I found is, now you can't really see it in this picture I took, but if you were to look at the Junkyard Dog nose on, you're going to notice that that part here is off on a bit of an angle. And I did that on purpose because I'm like, that actually looks kind of good. You can position it however you want. And that's one of the nice things about this kit is it's actually an easy kit. I had Tom York's original instructions, but I didn't use them. I just kind of looked at the parts and said, wait a minute, I know what I'm doing here. And it just kind of fell together. Obviously you have to write the instructions anyway, because just because somebody knows what they're doing doesn't mean they might not want some pointers, or somebody who's never built a kit before. If they've never built a locomotive and can't recognize this part goes here and this part goes here, they need to know how to do it. So at least there's an outline of something for them to do so they can build it and be successful. That's at least the way I look at instructions, because, a lot of the people I sell to are very smart people. And even if I give them instructions, half the time is by the time they've realized they've gotten the instructions, they've already finished the build. You know what I mean? I can't help that. There's some cases that I forgot to send somebody in the instructions. They're like, hey, can I just see the instructions just to see how this was supposed to go together? I'm like, wait, you already built it and I forgot to send them to you? Okay, whoops. For one, I'm not going to claim to be a perfect man. Never will be. Just how I am, but I write the instructions anyway. But on this, it's going to be pretty much, this is the assemblage of parts. This is your before you put the parts together, and this is the after you put the parts together, and basically walk through it and have the photos of the step-by-step process in the instruction. Somebody had actually suggested that to me about a year ago for any of my instructions. And I can't remember for the life of me who that was, but whoever gave me that advice, because the sad part is if it was Kevin or Al, I'd remember that. I literally just can't remember who gave me the advice. And it makes perfect sense, because even a skilled builder who knows exactly what they're doing and can build just about anything, just give them a pile of materials, some bubble gum, and maybe a toothpick, and you can build it. Well, not everyone is like that, but even those guys do occasionally like to see how somebody built something, which to me is not a bad thing. If anything, I like people to critique my instructions because that's going to tell me if I'm on the ball or not. There's some other things on here too. You'll notice that these footboards, these are laser cut. I have to dig up the picture, but what were originally the footboard stanchions that were actually also doubled as sides, as the supports for the sides. Well, they actually slot right into the footboards or the end plates. There's a slot for them. They slot in perfectly. Well, on this front one, I made an oops. I pushed it in and I snapped it like a twig when I was building this yesterday. And I'm like, okay, well, I can fake it to make it work. So at least it looks right. Although if you flip it over, you will see there's a stanchion missing. Luckily, there's enough surface there that it just glues onto and it stays put. Couplers are just KDs, which I like KDs because, hey, who doesn't? I just use the whisker couplers and the 242 boxes, snap together ones. That's basically become my standard for couplers because they work. I don't have to question that they work, and I've yet to run into a problem with them. So that works pretty well. The only other thing I changed on this, aside from the hood sides, was the cab. So the cab was originally like 5 or 6 different pieces, and there was a piece that would go over the top of it, like some sort of foil. Basically make it look like the roof's been replaced or it's falling apart, because as a junkyard dog, this is basically something that looks like it's been beat up and abused. And why in the world is this thing still able to run? That was the point of it. Well, and Tom did a very good job with that, but I looked at those pieces and I'm like, these are a little bit fiddly. As much as a master modeler can probably put them together, I am not a master modeler myself. I am a very good designer, But building wise, I'm not the best builder, and I'll admit to that, because that's why I design on a computer, because that's my crutch. So I looked at that and I go, I make single piece cabs that I print. And at first I looked at just printing it. I'm like, no, the cost is just prohibitive. Even if I ordered 50 of them, the cost would still be prohibitive. So I'm like, okay, let's print one off and let's just have it resin cast, which is what we did. And it's a single piece cab. And one of the things that you'll notice if you ever get one of these kits, the frame plate down here has inset spaces to it. And what do I mean by that? Well, there's a section in the middle that's raised basically as a floor. So the engine compartment has one, and then there's a space between the engine compartment floor and the floor that's in the cab back here. You can't really see it on this. But what's nice about the single piece cab is that once you get it cleaned up, clean the flash off it and, get everything so it goes together, it actually will snap right on around that lip and it will stay there.
Yep.
So let's say, for instance, you just want the locomotive to be, you want to be able to pull that off so if you can get to electronics. You could probably assemble this hood structure and just snap it into place. Failing that, you could probably even use a screw into the front hood and just assemble the body and just mount it. There's a myriad of ways you could do this that makes it so that way if you ever need to take the engine apart to service something, like let's, for instance, say you use the hood space to hide electronics. Well, there are doors. I don't have them on the model I built, but these slots, the doors literally just punch right into and they just sit there. You could glue them into place so that way they don't go anywhere, but they just press right in. And that was one of the ideas I had, because I realized I have a master for a door here. And these original hoods are just kind of the doors mounted at weird angles. I'm like, well, that can work. Would you rather have something that you could customize yourself? So I figured, okay, we've got the door master. We know what space the door has to fit in. Let's just make a hood side that you can mount the door in, and you could pose it if you wanted to. If you really wanted to get fancy, these hood sides are probably thick enough that you could probably drop a pin through them and make it so those doors actually move. If you really wanted to get that fancy, that would probably take some doing, but I don't think it's impossible. You just got to be very good, and you have to have some small ends, and you probably could do that if you really wanted to. But again, that hood space gives you the ability to hide electronics. Now, you'd have to put the hood doors on it so that way you don't see the electronics. But one of the things about the prototype that I noticed when I'm looking at pictures of it is the doors are actually all flush with the side of the body. You can see the seam lines, but it looks like you just press the door in and then it pops open. It looks almost like it's spring loaded. Without seeing it for myself, it's tough to tell, but that's what it looks like. Either that, or there's some sort of latch that allows you to remove the whole door. Again, without seeing the prototype, it's tough to tell. But I did that with the hood, so it's a little bit more customizable. And anyone and their mother can set a door, especially if it's supposed to fit there. Like I said, you can see this better on this blank space is basically the extension I made and had these laser cut out of. I just did them out of a styrene, had them done out of a type of styrene plastic, so that way they'll super glue. Because I could have done cardboard, I could have done wood. Here's the problem. A lot of these parts have a very smooth finish to them. So if you paint it, what sort of prep work are you going to have to do so it blends? So I went with the plastic because I figured that's going to be closer to your final, it's going to make it easier for you. So you don't have to take a wood panel and sand it and fill it and sand it again and just keep doing that until it's perfectly glass smooth. Because even if you have a piece of plywood, laser cut plywood, that's not necessarily going to work. Not to say you can't do it, but you might screw it up. You might put divots in it. Let's just make it simple so people can succeed.
Hey, Dylan?
Yep.
What kind of plastic did you use here? Because I found that my usual MEK and stuff like this wouldn't glue things together. I had to use ACC for it.
It's called POM, and I know it's a type of styrene, I know that. As for the specific type of resin, I don't know. I'd have to talk to the casting guy.
And I was just curious because, like I said, I couldn't get what I usually use to do my plastic work. Wouldn't glue it. I did everything with a ACC or epoxy.
Well, I used ACC on this, and it all took. I didn't have any MEK or anything to try
Right.
because
MEK said, "No, I'm not doing this."
No, I know. I'd have to see exactly what type of resin was used. I know when I've glued it in the past, but I've used regular like ACC. I've used like gel type super glues that like Loctite make.
Right.
That's the type of stuff I've used, and that takes to it very well.
Right. Exactly. I went great with it with ACC. I was just curious because, like I said, you said it was plastic, and I couldn't get to
yeah, the hood, like I said, the hood sides are. It's a material called POM, which, from what I can tell, is some sort of styrene. I noticed it's a glossy finish, so maybe that's part of the problem. That said, the hood sides work at least, which is good because these are just the hood sides that we're going to use, so that way you guys can get the kits in a reasonable amount of time. Because I've got about 15 to 20 pre-orders. People who are patiently waiting that I've talked to. I said, this is what's going on. I put the updates on the Facebook page, basically to say this is what we're doing. I even put out an update this morning about the ladder for the rear of the cab. And I'd rather tell people where I'm at because I'm a believer in communication. But it's also a matter of, I want to get it out the door. I don't want to send it out until I'm comfortable with it. Because here's the problem. If I screw something up on this is a Tom York kit. As far as I'm concerned, treat it like it is a bar of gold. Because it is very well done, and you need to treat it with respect. If I don't treat it with that respect, what am I doing? I haven't, to me, I have to earn that. So that way it looks good. You've earned, this is something that Tom York designed. There are people out there, sure, that have his kits and that make them. But this is the first one I've ever done, and I want to earn that. Just because I bought it doesn't mean I've earned that right to sell it. For me, and this might actually come into one of Jim's questions of when do you know it's good enough? To me, it's a matter of, is the customer going to have everything they need to build it? And are they going to be successful when they build it? Because if I'm not setting my customers up for success, I am doing something wrong. And I should probably be taken out back Soviet style. Joking aside, the fact is that's the way I look at it. If I screw something up, somebody obviously is going to say it to me. But I also don't want to send something out the door that doesn't deserve to go out the door.
But I got a couple questions. I noticed on your website it says for the junkyard dog use the ON30 trolleys. Are they still available?
They are. You can find them on eBay. You can, in theory, get the motor block specifically just through the Bachman Parts Department. And there is a ON30 group on Facebook called the ON30 and ON3 Marketplace that they regularly come up on because they made so many of these bloody trolleys.
Right.
The mechanism just works, which is good.
Yeah. Paul?
Yeah.
I bought the mechanism off of the parts thing, and it was like $30 plus shipping.
Okay.
Yeah. The good thing is, even if you can't just get the straight mechanism, like a Bachman trolley with everything on it, like in perfect condition, probably goes for about $50.
Right.
At least that's what I found, because that's the one I bought. It was $50.
Right. Yeah.
And that's how, it's $50. There wasn't a scratch on it. Everything was there. Perfect. And it worked like a dream too.
As long as it runs, that's all you care about,
Right. And to be honest with you, I have yet to see a trolley that has an issue running.
Right.
Converting it to DCC is possible. You'd have to cut the contact strips and wire in between the contact strips and the motor. But it's such a simple mechanism that it's very easy to do. You just need to know you just got to have the electronics knowledge to do it.
Right. Well, that's what I was going to ask about, converting them to DCC as well. And also that one motor the low profile motor you sell, can you convert that to DCC?
Yeah, all the mechanisms I carry, you can do the same thing to.
Okay, yeah,
I'm waiting for more to come in. I have one low profile left.
okay,
The biggest issue that and this is, let's actually stop the share for a second. One of the biggest problems that I have found from COVID is one of the companies I get my drives from, and they are very good drives. I love them. They run very smoothly, and problem is when you ship, when I ordered some right at the start of COVID, and I didn't realize at the time that the shipping situation was going to crash and burn like it did.
right,
It took me about 2-3 months to get them, and there were 2 orders right back to back, and those were for my orders for my Type H, which was like, oh God, I have people waiting for this, and I'm waiting for the drives, and I've got everything else here. Great. The good news is I talked to the manufacturer, and once I make my next order, they're at least willing to ship it UPS. I don't know what the shipping is going to cost, but they are at least willing to do it, which for me is a good thing, because UPS is right now one of the few people who can regularly get stuff out of Europe in a reasonable amount of time. Why do I say that? Well, all my 3D prints come from France, and all my nylon prints come from a company in France, because their office in California is still shuttered, and they're not allowed to make stuff in California yet. But in France, they can, and they ship it UPS. It gets sent over to England, I'm assuming through the Channel Tunnel, or somehow, and then it's flown over. So if we ship it UPS for the drives, it might take a little bit longer than normal. It's tough to say because I don't know how UPS works in that part of Europe, but they're willing to try. The company's willing to try it for me, which is great, because the company in question, a company called Halling, they make HO scale trolleys, but their customer service is fantastic. And whenever I have had a technical question, they have been right on the ball.
yeah,
They have been on the ball. They've told me what you would need to do. They've told me how you would have to do it. They do give they care about their product. They really do. And I appreciate that, because think about it. You need to stand by what you sell,
right,
and they do. I have never. The good news is I have never had a problem with one of their drives. And from what I can tell, nor have any of my customers. I do know
low profile one would be great.
right, and it's a tiny drive. It's designed for an HO scale trolley.
Critters involved that I want to make, and it's hard to find them low profile drives.
Right. The trolley drive for us ON30 guys is low profile.
Right.
But it is still kind of tall, and it lends itself to larger locomotives, like the Junkyard Dog. So if you look at that, for instance, you compare that to a Bachmann Whitcomb switcher, it's about half the size of that.
Right. Yeah.
Width-wise, it's about just as wide, but length-wise, it's about half that length, because both of those were built to standard gauge proportions. I don't know quite what Bachmann did with the Whitcomb. I have a feeling I know, but I don't know for certain. To me, when I look at the Whitcomb that I have sitting in my cabinet, it looks like they took a standard gauge Whitcomb 44 tonner in O scale, maybe tweaked around the dimensions a little bit, just enough so it looked right, and then they dropped the side rod trucks under it.
Dylan, the Whitcomb is actually a catalog Whitcomb that was used in South America.
Okay, that I didn't know.
Yeah, Whitcomb made the Whitcomb and the what was the other company? Not Whitcomb.
Davenport?
Davenport, I think the 44 tonners were identical. They actually were off the same place.
Oh, I didn't know that.
No.
Well, you learn something new every day. So, what else have I been working on?
Whitcomb, and it looks totally different than what the one that Bachmann made.
Right.
Hey, Bill, you're breaking up.
I'm sorry. I said my local museum has a Whitcomb, but it's totally different from what the Bachmann looks like, from side frames to everything.
What type? You know, if it was one of those? I know Whitcomb made engines for the War Department. Does it look kind of like almost like a giant triangle, for lack of a better way of putting it?
No,
No. All right.
no,
So that might
No,
not be the Army ones then.
no, it's not a. Talk about the 65 tonners, the one had that kind of weird hood design used in World War II. Those are
Yeah.
really cool.
Oh, I know.
That's not,
So what else am I working on? Well, we are working on becoming a dealer for a company that you guys will know who they are. We're working on going through the paperwork now. So that way we can get that done, get some inventory in, and start selling the stuff. I'm not going to say who it is just yet. You guys will all know who it is when you see it, which is good. It is a good thing. It's a household name, for lack of a better way of putting it. And I will say this: when I first asked them, they got back to me very quickly. And the understanding I had is when they first took over, there was a lot of stuff going on, and they were very busy. Well, they made the time for me. I had an email back from them within a day with what I needed to do. So that is another project for this week to get that paperwork done, so we can, get it all squared away. Get some stuff ordered. No, Ed, it's not MTH. It's someone else.
Bill, that looks a lot better.
okay.
Fair question, but it's not MTH. It is someone who, like I said, we all know who they are, but I'm just gonna leave it at that until I've got some stuff here, because I want to actually, when I announce it, I want to have some stuff on the shelf that I can sell, because I don't want to say we're becoming a dealer for so-and-so and then not have any of their product. So the goal is get the paperwork done, get some product ordered, and once we get it in, make the announcement and say, yes, it is going up on the website today. So if you need some, contact us or feel free to order through the website. Like I said, I want to actually have the stuff here because I can make use of it in other designs as well, which is good. It will be good, and I think you guys will find it very good. And it's going to be, I think it's going to be a good sign of things for them as well. Like I said, I don't want to name them. I'm very tempted to, but I want to wait until I have the stuff here, because like I said, I want to be able to provide it when I announce it and say, this is what I've got. Come at me. Because to be frank, I would feel a little bit silly doing it the other way and just saying, we're just waiting for the stuff to show up. I want to have it on the shelf ready to go. But I think once the announcement goes out in a couple weeks, I think you guys will be coming to me and going, oh, that's cool. The other major thing we're doing, I don't have a picture of it on my laptop, unfortunately, because I'm not at my desktop at home. I am still in Harrisburg, so I'm a little bit limited. One of the things we're doing is we are doing a critter, the Type W1. I mentioned it during the train show, and I showed some pictures of it, of the etchings that were developed. I had a few people tell me go to the same guy. And so I went to him, and turns out he likes what I'm doing, so he was willing to help me out. So he's doing the etchings on the Type W1. And why did I go to etchings? Well, it's not so much as cost-wise, it's ease of building it. Because my hope was to make something that would drop right into place that you really don't have to fiddle with, but looks really good. And to me, an etched plate, like that you would just bend the radiator fins or you would put the grill on, something like that. To me, something like that would look pretty good. And that's what we're doing there. We're hoping to have them ready in October. The test fit ones he got, while they were great, one of the doors was backwards. So he's like, yeah, I got to order some more, which not a big deal. I was hoping to launch it this winter anyway. My hope is with the W1 is that is going to replace the Type W in my catalog, which is designed. If you guys look at my website, it's up there now. I need to take it down because I think I've got only one or two left that I can throw together. But it's basically a derivative of that design, and it's meant to go on a different mechanism. Again, continuing the tradition of me giving you everything, including the mechanism. So that way you can just build it and be done with it. It uses a different one though, that's a lower profile, so you could probably fit some cab details in there. You can fit some, you might be able to fit a decoder under the hood, like a small one. I'm sure I will have someone, like some of my customers who decide to get really creative, who will probably try to figure out how to fit sound, DCC, and keep alive in that thing. And they will probably be very successful with it, because I have a few customers who have done that. Jamie Dupes comes to mind. He was working on that for a while, and from what I heard when we've last talked, that was going well. So I'm assuming somebody is going to do the same thing with the W1, and they'll have a little bit more room to do it with it. The etchings, like I said, that for me, it's a first. I'm stealing the idea from Kevin. Kevin, being a mentor of mine, is he is a fountain of good ideas. And when I say fountain of good ideas, I mean good ideas. He looks at me and goes, okay, this is good, but this is how you can make it better. And the idea of a multimedia kit where it's more than just a resin casting and 3D prints was Kevin's idea. I really got to thank him for that, because that was him who helped push me in that direction to investigate it. I can't complain. I have some people ask me if I would just sell them the etchings, and I am considering that, because maybe if you scratch build something around how the etchings are designed, you can make something very good. I'm not opposed to that, but it's primarily for the W1. Like I said, I don't have any pictures on my laptop. I feel a little bit silly that I didn't go looking for them earlier, but the open house didn't wrap up until about 2 hours before Jim and I got on and started talking. So didn't really have much time to go through. I had to eat dinner, lunch, whatever I was calling it, and get some food in my stomach, because I'm up early tomorrow so I can head for home. That said, the other one I showed you too during the train show is a steam dummy conversion for Bachmann's 042. Some people might wonder, why did I go with the 042? You could probably make this kit work on the 040 version of the Porter. You probably could, because the front part of the engine is identical. The only thing that's different is the rear frame and the wiring and how it's wired, because the PCB board that mounts everything is in a different location. The reason I did that is, well, one, it's a simple kit to build. The alignment prototype that I have at home, everything lines up perfectly. The stack fits right into the hole in the roof. The whistle lines up right with the port on the top of the steam dome. Great, good to go. So the other thing, I got to get back with Steve and Millie, because he's helping me with the paneling for it. The idea was, okay, you can make a 3D printed shell. You can make laser cut windows. How do you make that look like wood? Because the bodies for these were primarily made out of wood. Sure, you might have some metal nails or something, but it's a wood body. So the thought came to my head, okay, what if you just have a laser cut wood panel and you just glue it right in place? Then you have some actual wood look to it. And in the spots that it's not just made up of the trim, and you can just mount it, assemble it. Very easy kit to assemble. You can even use, what I noticed is you can even use the cab screws for the rear two cab screws line up. The modified body lines up perfectly with those holes. Small little drill bit, tap out the hole, put the screws in, because they are self-tapping screws, and you're good to go. And it's not going to go anywhere. It's just a matter of working out the specifics on the hoods, on those panels, so we can get that done. There is one other thing I have been working on, and while I'm talking to you guys, what I'll do is I'll boot up my CAD program so I can show it to you. But basically, it's another Porter kit. And the idea came to me after I saw the picture of Mishcal Lumber's small little 8-ton Porter with the angular tank. Basically, they built a new tank for it, a new cab. I'm like, I don't want to make something exactly like that, but I want to make something unique. So the idea was, let's make a new saddle tank. I already have a cab that I can use, so let's use that. throw an air compressor on it for good measure because I have a small air compressor that would work well with it. And, throw a bell on it. The biggest issue that you have, though, is you need weight on those porters. Anyone in ON30 who has run a porter will tell you you take the saddle tank off and you lose most of the weight. I mean, even though they are basically die cast at this point, for the new ones, metal construction and whatnot, it's still a very light locomotive when you take that tank off. So, thanks to some friends, they hooked me up with a guy who can do white metal casting. It's just a matter of where he lives. He's in a fire zone right now because he's out west. So he's like, I can't really start pouring these just yet until it's safe to do so, which to me is fine. I'm not going to ask you to burn your whole neighborhood down just for me. That is not right. That's also kind of makes me look bad. Let's be honest. If you're doing something for me and the neighborhood gets wiped out because, there's dry grass and trees everywhere, I'm probably going to be getting a lot of angry phone calls. I'm just guessing that those angry phone calls might also be followed by letters, including bills for the damages, and I don't want to be responsible for that. So, okay, once it's safe to, cast them up, we'll get them cast up. If this CAD program would load, I could show you the whole kit. But while we wait for that to load, do we have any questions?
What's a W?
Questions.
Fire away.
Can anybody see this on the end of my little
Yep.
piece of wire?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can see it.
Can you see the little bitty connector there?
Yeah, it looks like a JST connector.
No. It goes to that.
What is that?
It's called a Next 18. It's 16 connectors because they double up on the power connectors. Because the little pieces of copper in there is that tiny. I mean, if I can get my finger around it the right way, that is the complete connector.
Oh, you can't see it though.
Can you see it now?
It's showing out as a hologram.
It's the, hang on a minute here. Turn off my background and see if
There you
it,
go.
Try it now.
you guys could see my room. That.
Hold it closer to the camera.
That is the Next 18. That's a complete sound decoder. You mix that, you hook that up with a little 9x12 speaker. Because the speaker wires and everything go to this connector. Now, it's technically an in-scale decoder. But for a little critter, do you need any more?
So who makes it?
This one is a, I just went stupid, Loc Sound.
Oh, okay.
But there are other makers that make this. This is available readily in the United States. I don't know where all of you guys are from. I can get Australian sounds, European sounds. The new models have one difference. Apparently, there's a difference in the delay measurements between NMRA and Europe. And so naturally there's a decoder for each. But yeah.
All right. Well, I got the CAD program up.
I was just thinking that would fit your little bitty critters.
Yeah, it probably would in the small ones. But let's see. Now, do you guys all see something that looks like a drawing on a computer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, this is basically what the Porter modernization kit is going to look like. I forgot about mentioning the spark arrestor, but that's neither here nor there. I do have a prototype that I built at home, just using a printed tank. The tank came out fine, which is good. The biggest thing is, of course, getting that tank cast, because without this tank here, this whole kit doesn't work. And again, it comes down to the weight of the locomotive. The porters are very lightweight. You need this tank so this works, so you don't lose all the weight and it just doesn't do anything other than spin its wheels. You need it. The good news is this will fit either generation of porter. The old DCC ones that are plastic bodied and, you know, have the cast side tank, or a saddle tank, I should say, or even the new ones that are DCC equipped. It's going to fit those. And it should, in theory, fit either one. I could supply 2 different styles of cabs. This is just the one for the 042, which is designed to fit between the tank and the bunker. I could supply one for the 040, which just drops into the same space, and just, it'll work for either version of it. The spark arrestor, this is actually about a year old, and I've sold quite a few of these. But I got the idea from Al Judy, and he was very helpful in, you know, developing it, because he was kind enough to sit down with me, show me some parts so I could at least get an idea of what size it needed to be. The biggest thing, and I'll switch to a top view and scroll in, you see all this diamond pattern? Well, the idea was, on the spark arresters, was to basically make it so it looks like there is a screen in there. And I had the epiphany like that when I sat down. I'm like, okay, we make an inset diamond pattern and then we cut the space out. And then Al looked at me and goes, how are you going to do that? And I go, I'll cut it out with a sphere. Because when you make a body over another body, it'll cut out the impeding part of it. You know, you can basically use that tool to slice and dice your component. So I just made one that was hollow with the mesh all the way through, made a sphere, cut out the area, and then just took a solid one, did a sphere that was a little deeper in, cut that out, and then just merged the 2 bodies to make this. You'd have to see the actual ones that I have had printed, but the pattern is quite nice. It shows very well. And it's basically a barrel type spark arrestor. So what do I mean when I say barrel type? Well, for one, it's a barrel. As Al put it, they would make a spark arrestor using just about anything on a logging railroad that they had available. If they had a barrel, what they would do is they would cut it in half, put some sort of reinforcing bands, maybe some bolts, and they put the screen in it. And then the ash, it doesn't cover the whole stack, mind you, but the stack would fit in right about here. And then there's a space right, outside the edge of the stack where any ash that gets caught in the screen will just fall down around. Kind of unique. I'm not sure how well it worked, because, it's a matter of how good is your arrestor screen. But these were designed to be cheap, simple, and easy to build and easy to replace. Well, on a model, you don't need to replace it every few months, because you're just burning through the thing, which is a good thing, because as modelers, I don't think many of us would like to continually replace parts on our locomotives. I think that might get a little bit old very quickly. Let's be honest. If you have to replace something multiple times, it gets a little bit annoying. I come back to the rail trucks and the rail buses that Bachmann put out and the constant gear problems. And oh boy, whenever I talk to somebody about that, oh boy, does that start a firestorm. And it's not just the customer doing it. It's me feeding into it, because I have some very strong opinions on the rail trucks and the rail buses, having messed with both of them to try and get them working. The rail bus is an easy fix, because the gears are just not quite in mesh. You just need a shim behind the gear. The rail truck is a lost cause, and whoever let it out the door, look, if you had worked for me and you let that out the door, I would have fired you. That was an abomination. Just having torn apart 4 or 5 of them and finding the same problems in every single one's gearbox, where the gears have about 2 to 4 millimeters of slop in them. So as they spin, they just fly out of engagement. Oh boy, does that not make me happy to see that. That just makes me angry, because why would you let that out the door? It's sad that it was let out the door, because it is the rail buses and the rail trucks are very nice models. Problem is you can get the rail buses running, especially the later ones. The rail trucks, almost universally, you have trouble getting to run. Not to say you can't get them to run, but it is tricky. And like I said, the gearboxes are just, you can't fix those gearboxes. Believe me, I before the Salvation Repower kit came around, I spent many a days bashing my head on my desk as I tried to figure out a way to get one to work. Yeah, it wasn't happening. My first solution was, hey, maybe you just fix the one of the gear collars in place so it doesn't slide up and down. Well, then once I noticed I didn't realize the gear slop issue was that bad until I started playing with the gears. Yeah, like I said, whoever let that out the door, if you had worked for me, I would have just canned you on the spot, because that is bad. That is very bad. And that's, like I said, I've got some strong feelings about it. So
I was given a Bachman. Dylan, I was given a Bachman Climax pair of trucks, and the guy said, "This one doesn't work." And I looked at it and found out that the input shaft was moving back and forth and coming out of mesh with the other gear on the axle. So I have to go in and put extra washers on that input shaft between that and the case to keep it from doing that.
I would check to make sure there's not like a crack in the collar, because on the Climaxes, there's a universal joint that mounts on the end of that gear. I would check to make sure that collar didn't crack, because that could explain why it's sliding back and forth. If that collar cracked, there's nothing to hold it in place. So it's just a matter of, you have to replace that U-joint. Now, the Climax is, at least it's easy to do it. There's nothing wrong with the gearbox. You know, once you replace the stock gears, if there is a gear issue, they work. It's just a little bit fiddly, for lack of a better way to put it, because it is a rubber washer that holds the two U-joints together. I've done it many a times. It's not difficult. It's fiddly, because if you lose that U-joint, you're in trouble. Luckily, they use that same U-joint on the Shays and the Heislers. I got a feeling that they probably use the same bevel gears on many of these engines too. Because when you look at, like, for instance, the rail truck, and you compare the drive shaft to, say, a rail bus, and you look at the gears and you're like, these are basically identical. So they probably use the same tooling to produce these gears, which is fine. But then you've got the other little problems. And with the Shay, I remember with the Shay, it was the gears cracking, and you have to, re-gear the trucks. Okay. So they fixed that problem on the Climax, but then they forgot that the U-joints could be a problem too. And then they had it totally ironed out by the time they hit the Heislers, because I have never heard of a Heisler with a gear problem, which is a good thing. They at least learned. It took them a little bit long to learn it, but they did at least learn the lesson. Which at least it shows that they know when they make a mistake, they try to fix it. But with the rail truck, there is, oh my God. Like, I know I keep coming back to it.
Bachman's always had a lot of issues with gear issues. I mean, even in G gauge, they had some big problems with their the Shay. They used all plastic, and the metal would heat up from the motor. The motor would heat up the plastic and then just melt it.
Okay, that's a different problem.
Well, and then
at least that us ON30 guys haven't had that problem.
Yeah, ended up
for us, it's been
sold a conversion kit then for put metal gears in. It's why did you do that?
The sad part is you can make a plastic gear and you can work, and it'll work fine.
Yeah.
For instance, I import Haskell's ON30 products. They're NQR steel gondolas, and most importantly, as far as the big ticket items go, is their NA262 tank engine. Now, the tank engine has plastic gears, but Kieran at Haskell and his guys put the time in to make sure that the gears wouldn't split, that they would stay, and they would do what you need them to do. They put a lot of time into making sure that gear worked.
Yeah.
So it's not that you can't make it work. Part of the problem with some of the Bachmann gears, or the reason they would split, the story I've heard is that it's unaged Delrin. Well, apparently Delrin plastic shrinks as it gets older, which I didn't know that until, about a year ago, which is when I figured it out. When somebody told me that story, I'm like, that makes sense. If you at least had let it age, you might not have a problem because it's only going to shrink so much.
Well, isn't it the prevalence of all the Bachmans out there that made everybody so concerned about Northwest Shortline going under?
For a lot of guys, I guess that was the case.
Yeah. Delrin is very.
Northwest Shortline was a big supplier of Shea gears. They made a metal gear replacement kit for the Shays that Bachmann put out in ON30. And it fixed all the problems. If you have metal gears on your Shea, you don't have a problem. You're good. Just grease it a little bit, maybe a little bit of gear oil, you're fine. But like I said, it looks like they used the same gears on the Climaxes, on the Heislers, the rail trucks and rail buses. The bevel gears, honestly, to my eye, without counting all the teeth, look to be exactly the same. That's just my observation. If I'm wrong, I'm sure somebody with the technical knowledge will tell me, hey, you're wrong. But from my eye, you look at it and they look the same. So to me, let's say I'm a manufacturer, for instance, tooling can be expensive, especially for gears, because they're complex tools to make. So what's going to be cheaper? To make a new gear every time you make a locomotive, or to just use the same gears and tie it into a different gear box using a different combination of gears you already have? To me, it's going to be better to just use what I already have, because then I don't have to make it again. I've already got the tooling for it, so have at it. I can just make it from what I've got. Whether that's right, wrong, or indifferent, that's a smart way of doing it, because, a tool could for gears could easily cost you $10,000 just for the gear tool. Now, you could probably make more than one gear in it, but that's still expensive. And think about it. Gears are supposed to be cheap, meaning how many of them do you have to make to recover that investment? You've got to make a lot of gears. And so you could be talking hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of gears before you've recovered your return on investment in that tool. So if you use those gears over multiple locomotives, regardless of, in the same scale, then you're going to recover your return on investment a lot quicker because you're spreading it out among multiple projects. That's not a bad thing. It's just a matter of you got to make a good quality gear. So that means you have to use a good quality material. Not to say they didn't learn, they did. And like I said, you look at the Heisler, when you compare all the issues that the earlier geared engines had, and you look at the Heisler, and the Heisler just doesn't have them. It behaves like one of Bachmann's rod engines, which frankly, the rod engines they look like they applied the lessons of their HO scale line. There's some similarities I've seen in, say, the inside frame American, the small one that was based off of the Mount Gretna engine, the 2-foot gauge, this 2-foot gauge 440 that ran in Pennsylvania. It looks very similar to their regular 440s at HO scale, but scaled up a little bit because you need that bigger mechanism. Very similar. Even how the boiler mounts is similar, but it's got slightly bigger wheels. It's slightly longer. So they applied the lessons they learned in HO scale to their ON30 products because, well, it's the same wheelbase, so you can reuse the axles. Let's just make some bigger wheels. Stretch it out a little bit so it looks right. And, you're basically using the same gearing. That would not surprise me either. It's just I haven't pulled one apart to compare the gearing. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if it shared the ON30 stuff shared gears with the HO stuff, too. That wouldn't surprise me. That wouldn't surprise me of any manufacturer, to be honest with you. I talk about Bachmann a lot because they're the big ON30 guy. But that wouldn't surprise me if multiple projects shared the same basic mechanical components, regardless of scale. Because like I said, that's smart because gear tooling is expensive. And of course, tooling in general is expensive too. Like you look at, for instance, you have to make a die for die cast. That's a lot more expensive because it's a different material and has to last just as long. It's got to be something tougher so it can take, hot metal as opposed to hot plastic that's cooling off really quickly.
Dylan,
Yep.
you were talking about the inside frame 440 from Bachman on ON30.
Yep.
If you take that body, compare it to a SN3 SP 440, they're damn near identical.
So you could probably convert one of those to SN3.
Oh yeah. From the front axle of the pony truck to the rear driver matches the SN3 drawing for a 440 on the SP. The only thing you have to do is cut down the stack and change the domes. And you got an easy conversion. Well, pressing the wheels together too.
I didn't know that, but that's actually good. That is good to know.
There's 4 articles now on converting Bachmann ON30 to S standard. Northwest Shortline makes the axle you need. And then, like Paul says, you change out all the domes and stacks and the cab and the air pump, whatever else to S scale. But the basic body and mechanism is the Bachmann. You said twice now in 2 different shows that the 440 is off the Mount Gretna. It's actually the other way around. The Bachmann 440 is a Bachmann catalog engine, right off the blueprints. Standard catalog engine. The Mount Gretna was modified from a Bachmann catalog engine. They just weren't satisfied with the catalog, I guess. They paid extra to get options and differences.
I see. See, I always was told the story the other way around, that, it was based on.
Oh yeah, it's a very popular story, but it's not quite right. What was the guy's name? He died and the line went to whatever.
Lee Riley.
Yes, Lee Riley was a great fan of lifting stuff out of the Baldwin catalog. Because if you go to the DeGoyer library, you can get all the erection drawings for every little fine detail, which he then turned into ON30 or HO or whatever, and boom, there you are. Even his USRA engines in HO are lifted right off the Baldwin erection drawings. And
So those DeGoyer Library, what is that? I've heard of that before.
Southern Methodist University, Dallas, Texas.
Okay.
The only problem is I think they're stuck in the Stone Age. It's not digitized. It's not digitized. The only way to get to the drawings is to go there, you have to be registered first. They got to go through, well, what do you want to look at the drawings for? And blah, blah, blah. And then you got to go there, put on white gloves and do it all by hand. And they won't do it for you. You can't make a phone call and say, here's the Baldwin order number and I want the drawings. Oh no, you got to go search the bloody thing yourself. That's why you don't hear so much about people going and doing it, because it's a pain in the.
It's a bear to do.
Yeah, you got to go to Dallas, which you can't do right now.
Yeah, that's a little bit tough to do it at the moment, but that is good. I did not know that they had Baldwin drawings.
Oh yeah, they got them all, or most of them.
That's good to know, because
What they
I'm
don't
sure I'm not
have-
the only one who could use that to make like detail parts.
Yeah, the only things they don't have are at the Smithsonian or at the California State Railroad Museum.
Huh, it's good to know.
There's a few more. There's a website out there somewhere, where are all the Baldwin drawings or something like that, that's got a list of all the museums that have everything. Now, of course, there's stuff missing and there's big holes in the collection because.
It's hard to save everything from a company like Baldwin that.
Well,
they're
when,
closing up
yeah,
shop.
when the plant was shut down, a lot of stuff went in the trash.
I know that's the sad reality of it, unfortunately. Because think about it, that's a lot of stuff to hold on to for a company that's around for over 100 years and has kept all the paperwork because some of their products are just that old.
There was in the mold room at the Baldwin factory, after they moved out of downtown. There was stuff kept, even the wood stuff, you know, the patterns and molds and whatever, from some of the first stuff they ever made. Massive warehouse of stuff. And it all went in the trash.
The only company I could think of that any of the patterns were saved in any great detail is, if I understand correctly, was Glover.
Yeah, Glover down in Kennesaw, Georgia. They've got a museum down there with a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, and like I said, the problem is the stuff takes up space. So let's talk preservation for a second. You know, you look at a railroad museum and they've got, for every one amazingly restored piece that is frankly deserving of being on the National Register of Historic Places because of either its historical worth or just how well it's been preserved, for every one of those, there's probably 2 or 3 cars out back that are falling apart. So it comes to the question, how do you save it? And the problem with someone like Baldwin and Glover and Lima and, you know, all these locomotive manufacturers is their stuff, while individually may be small, just the sheer volume of it takes up a lot of space, and you need the space to save it. A company like Baldwin, I mean, there's no way unless you are the richest man on the face of the planet and you decide, I am going to save this stuff and I'm going to build a place to store it, you're not going to be able to save it all. And even then, how do you preserve it so it lasts? You know, wood eventually rots, unfortunately, if you leave it in the wrong environment. So how do you preserve that? You got to keep it in a dry-ish environment. You know, you don't let moisture at it, because if you let moisture at it and it sits, it's going to rot. If you keep it too dry, well, it might dry rot. You have to preserve it somehow. And the same thing is, you could apply the same question to whether it be a battleship, whether it be an aircraft carrier, a locomotive, a tank. How are you going to save it? And there's a cat going off in the background. I'm sorry about that. So it becomes a question of how do you save it? You know, paper is in theory easier to save, but paper still takes up a lot of room when you have a lot of paper. You know, there's no easy way to do it, unfortunately. You know, I've had this conversation with people before, is we can't save everything. So let's save what we can, and of what we can, let's try to make sure it's as well preserved as we can make it. Does that necessarily mean we're going to be successful? No. You know, perfect example, USS Slater. Even though they have a very well-maintained museum and they just dry docked the destroyer escort in question, when they pulled it out of dry dock, the hull sprung a leak. They had to go right back into dry dock because it was a big enough leak where they're like, we can't really bring this back up the Hudson River back to Albany. So they had to, you know, put it back into dry dock, pump it all out and redo it because, you know, stuff breaks. The same thing can probably be said of steam locomotive restorations too. You know, how many times has somebody done the boiler work and they find, say, a leaking staple? That's going to happen on any locomotive. Eventually a staple leaks because there's a seal between that and, you know, there's a seal somehow. Well, eventually that seal can fail and you're going to have a staple leak. Eventually the welds on the end of a tube, or what the caulking or whatever you use to seal the tubes against the tube sheet, well, eventually that fails too. And then, or eventually the tube gets a pinhole in it because it's immersed in a high oxygen environment and water destroys metal. You know, eventually these things happen. So it's a question of how do we best save what we've got? And that is a question, unfortunately, I don't think anyone has an answer to, because it's a question of money, it's a question of manpower, and it's a question of space. The bigger it gets, the more space it takes, the more volunteers it takes, and the more money it takes. You've got space, money, volunteers for everything that you preserve.
Yep.
You know, you look at, say, I don't know, Battleship Cove is one that comes to my mind because it's close to my house. I'm within an hour of a battleship, a destroyer, and a submarine, all in one place. they have hundreds upon hundreds of volunteers working on those ships to maintain them at any given point of the year, just because it is that big of a task. When you're maintaining a private collection and say a library, okay, you still need people to do it, but where's the money and the manpower come from? Or the space, I should say. Documents are probably easier to, preserve than say a locomotive, because, if you have dry space and you take care of it properly, you could do it with, maybe 2 or 3 people. That's just my guess. If people who probably work in document preservation may have something to say to me about that too. I'm not going to lie and say I'm not an opinionated person. I am. That's just how I am.
Oh, we'd never guess that.
Yeah, you would have never guessed that, would you? I did a very good job hiding it. I just let it. And I just let the facade.
I personally am familiar with Battleship Texas. The state of Texas Parks Department didn't have enough money and manpower to keep that thing from sinking.
Right, and now it's a constant fight to keep it afloat.
Yeah, but it was sitting on the bottom of the concrete trough, but it was still sunk. I mean, not very far, but
enough where you can't really get it out.
There's moving it. So but they are going to move it. They turned it over to a private preservation group.
They appropriated a lot of money
volunteers
to fix that ship up too. I think it was somewhere north of like $250 million. But that's also Texas's battleship, and it's the oldest one outside of the Mikasa that's still around. It's the oldest dreadnought type.
Mikasa is older, yes.
you know,
But the Mikasa is encased in concrete.
right. Texas is the oldest one still floating or fighting to float.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's probably more of a fight some days to keep it afloat than others. But like I said,
actually, there's a foundation now that owns it, and they're going to drain it, fix it, and float it, and it's going to take billions of dollars.
Mhm.
That's the reason
I
the
can
state
believe it.
didn't do it. It wasn't the budget. It had to belong to someone else. There's a constant flow of state money, but the private funds are just astronomical. It's still going to take them 10 years to even get started.
Oh, I can believe it on a ship that's been neglected for that long. Yeah, I can believe it. But like I said, with anything in preservation, it comes down to manpower, money, and space. Those are the three big things as I see it.
Well, there's also, you got to remember that sometimes natural disasters could, take all that work and just eliminate it.
And that's I would argue that that's part of the money problem, because think about it. Once that happens, you got to pay to fix it. I think after a disaster, there's probably going to be plenty of people who care about those museums that are going to be like, let's fix it. But if the money's not there to pay for the supplies, it's probably not going to happen. Not to say there aren't museums out there that haven't recovered, or, the insurance helped pay for it, or they had donors step up and say, you know what, we'll help you guys out because you're a good museum. There are many museums that have had that, but there's also just as many that probably have been knocked out by a natural disaster because they just couldn't get the money to fix anything.
Yeah, for the locomotive that's right behind me, it's from the Middleburg and Schoharie. And there was a museum that not only did the Middleburg and Schoharie, but also the Schoharie Valley Railroad. Both railroads, total length, main line for both railroads was 10 miles. And basically they wound up the main building in Schoharie basically was the office for both railroads. And from my understanding, they had every single piece of paper record of everything of what the railroads did. When they went out of business, everything went to basically anything that was metal went to scrap. But there was a Middleburg and Schoharie I think it was either Baggage or Combine, I forgot exactly which wound up being sold to a farmer and was a chicken coop for a long time. And that's how they're able to salvage that out of, out of that as part of the rolling stock of these two railroads. And it wasn't until Hurricane Irene came along and basically the main building was 2 stories. The water level got up to halfway up the 2nd floor and took out everything that they had. Or I don't know where they are with reconstructing that. I haven't really been there since Irene, so. But I know pretty much from what I understand, most of the paperwork is gone.
That's part of the problem with paperwork, isn't it? A natural disaster is something that's just going to wipe it out. Because unfortunately, paper isn't waterproof.
For all of them.
You know what I mean?
One of the answers to your problem, you're talking about a really big donor. Well, they probably don't come much bigger than the Southern Pacific Corporation, which was going to tear down the Sacramento shops. And then the EPA came along and said, oh, you can't sell that land. There's 15 feet of oil underneath it from your locomotive work for 100 and something years. You got to clean all that up. And they were looking at, okay, the land's worth this, but it just became worthless. And the guy who just died, that was one of the big movers behind the California Museum, said, well, we got all of this stuff that we need to put somewhere. It'd really be nice to have it under roof. Can we have those buildings?
I know who you're talking about because he came up on RYPN.
Big bill. It all worked out so that they got a big SPUP got a big tax write-off instead of a big bill. But if all those steps hadn't come about just right, it wouldn't have happened. And all that stuff would still be sitting out in the back lot rotting.
That's a good point. Sometimes you need somebody to make it happen too, I guess. And I guess that comes down to the people part. Who do you have that's going to make it happen?
No, well, that's that guy that he just died. There was
no, I know who you're talking about. He came up on RYPN because he had like throat cancer or something. I know exactly. I can't remember. The guy's name escapes me, but I've read up on what he was doing, and I'm like, even until the end, he was working on stuff with them. Until he was unable to do it,
and he's
still doing it.
He moved there, but he's from somewhere else.
Yeah, sadly, the guy's name escapes me, but he's the reason that Sierra Railroad swapped the Pullman that they had for a Sierra Railroad coach that was at the California State Railroad Museum. Because they're both in the same system, but they're two separate museums. He apparently orchestrated that swap. I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head. I remember it was a couple weeks ago. He passed away, I think. I remember seeing it on Railway Preservation News, which, if you like preservation and history, it is a very good learning resource because people do talk about their projects on there. But it's a good resource, and it had come up on there. I'm like, and I was reading up on the guy. I'm like, wow, like I said, his name escapes me, but I remember looking at what he did.
But he never did anything public. He was always in the background.
And that's totally
he wasn't big.
You don't have, I think some of the best people in preservation aren't doing it they're not doing it to make a name for themselves. They're doing it because it's what's right and what should be done.
It gives them some kind of thrill. It's their enthusiasm is in that spot, and that's what they want to do.
Right. Like I said, though, my thought is you're not out there to make a name for yourself. You're out there to do it because it's what's right. That's my core belief. There are probably people who do it because they truly enjoy it. But to be fair, if you didn't truly enjoy it, would you be doing it? To be fair. I'm assuming, like I said, the guy from California State, his name escapes me, but if he did not truly enjoy what he did, I don't think he would have done it. If
I don't
anything,
think the museum would be there.
I don't think you're right. It probably wouldn't be. When I read up on what the guy did, he's basically one of the main reasons that the California State Railroad Museum got funding to even get off the ground.
St. Louis Transportation Museum, the one in Michigan, they're all got this one or two guys behind them that did it for the love of it or whatever reason. But if it wasn't for those one or two guys, those fabulous museums wouldn't exist.
Okay, here he is. His name is Dr. Denny Anspach. That's who he was. But you look at what the guy did. I mean, he got the funding to make it work. And
yeah, everybody else is.
California State Railroad Museum is basically one of the best museums out there. But hey, what do I know? I'm just a guy from the outside looking in. You know what I mean?
TC, what
Yeah.
was the museum in Michigan you was talking about?
It's not the one in Chicago. It's up on the peninsula, and I cannot think of the name of it. But they've got to collect, and they don't do just trains. They got all kinds of transportation stuff.
I think Minnesota Transportation.
I
or, if it's in Michigan, is it the museum in
Is it
Duluth?
Minnesota? It might
Not the
be.
one in Green Bay, is it?
I just can't remember. It might
It's not
be.
the one
I
in
just know it's up
Green
around that area, and I can't remember. Huh? Somebody's talking to me, cutting out really bad.
I think we lost them.
Yeah, it seems that all the people that are have low bandwidth and all that are trying to talk all at once.
Anyway, the thing about Delrin gears, the reason Bachman had so much problems is down to greed in a way, ignorance in another. You have to let Delrin set for, I think it's 3 years before it stops shrinking.
So that basically
if you're
lines up with the
working with-
story that I heard. They use the unaged stuff.
Yeah. What can you, like you're talking about, how much does it cost to store all those little gears in a warehouse for 3 years and then take them out and machine the bore because it's not anywhere near what it was supposed to be? That's a lot of money.
That is. It's gonna be. It's a pretty penny. And
Are
let's
you
be
talking
honest.
about,
They had,
Casey, you talking about letting the raw material age or the part age?
no, the part after it comes out of the press, you've got the molded part. And because the Delrin was heated, it starts shrinking all over again.
Huh. I didn't know that.
Now, you can add things to it to stabilize it, but pure raw acetyl plastic will shrink. 3D printers that have tried to print with Delrin have the same problem.
Right, because eventually the Delrin has to shrink somehow. You know, it's got to stabilize. and that's
It's
part
the
of it.
outgassing. Yeah. So they have to put other things in it, which they did, which fixed their problem. But it was a learning curve, I'm sure. I wonder if that engineer sought employment elsewhere.
I know we joke about it, and like I said, I've got my own very strong beliefs on it. To be fair, if you run the math, you could probably figure out roughly what size it needs to be and how much it's going to shrink by. So it could have very well been a simple matter of the math just didn't line up with the reality. You know what I mean? They could have
Oh,
figured.
for all we know, somebody had metric and English and British, and they got it all mixed together.
That's fair.
Dylan, I gotta ask you a question about your Delrin products you made. I've never tried to build with the material. How much cleanup do you have? I mean, you talk about the flashlight. How difficult is it to clean up the pieces?
You mean with the nylon?
Well, with the cab.
Well, with the cabs, I get them polished so they're ready to paint. You can prime it and paint the cabs I get printed out of nylon plastic, and I have what I have done is called polishing. So basically they put it into a tumbrel with a bunch of smooth stones that basically sands the surface. Otherwise, if you got it raw, you might have to prime it and sand it a little bit. But if it's already polished, you can just go right ahead, prime it, and paint it immediately. There's not much you have to do.
Jim,
I thought you said you had to clean off the flash and
On a resin casting, you do.
That's what I'm talking about. How much cleanup are you talking about on those?
With these castings that I had done, literally it was just take a hobby knife, slice it right off. So less than a second to clean up.
Not much then. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Regular
Jim-
resin is always going to have a flash to it, but it's not difficult to deal with.
Okay.
So
It
Jim,
comes off with sandpaper.
Okay.
So Jim, when I did my dog, the only thing I did clean the cab was the windows.
You
Everything
broke
else
up.
was-
You're breaking up, Bill. I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll try again. I said, when I did the junkyard dog, the only thing I had to clean was the windows. Everything else was.
Okay.
So Dylan, when are you going to offer all that beautiful stuff in Asheville?
That's the question, isn't it? I want to conquer O scale first before I worry about another scale.
Oh, that'll
You know
take
what I
the rest of
mean?
your
I
life.
want to be at a point where I am happy with O scale before I start figuring out another scale entirely, because every scale being different is kind of tricky. Not to say I wouldn't mind looking at another scale, like another Craftsman scale, but I want to get O scale figured out first. ON30 is only one part of the equation. There's ON3, there's ON2, there's O scale proper, there's P48, or yeah, P48. There's the 3-rail guys. I want to try and figure it out to see if there's anything I can offer in any of those other areas. Because if I can offer something, I'm going to try and do it, because to me, that's worth trying. But that's just me. You know, I'm the type of guy who likes pushing boundaries, and as well as pushing buttons. You know, I can't help but occasionally push the button on someone. You know what I
Well,
mean?
you've got the plans for the O scale junkyard dog, right?
Yes, I do. Luckily, I think it was Bill that sent them to me, if I remember correctly. I've got the plans for the standard gauge. Now they're HO scale plans, but that's just a matter of scaling,
Yeah.
which that's an easy thing to do.
From York's magazine, Dylan.
Okay, so that's where they came from originally. Okay.
They have both the O scale and the HO drawing on it.
Oh, they
So
do?
that-
Okay, I just saw the HO drawing on it.
Is that engineering drawings, or what drawings are they?
Drawings of the locomotive itself.
Okay.
Tom had a magazine back in the 80s for about 4 years, and he had some of his drawings in there, and that was one of them.
Bill, can I take one of those plans and build it in brass?
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
I'll send it to you.
Oh, that'd be great. If you
I'll
guys,
scan it and send it to you.
I'd love to try to build it in brass.
Yeah, well, I've already made a list, Dylan, of the parts I need from the junkyard dog to build a standard gauge one.
Send me the list then,
I will.
because I can have the parts made pretty easily.
Okay, I'll give you the list. There's only like 12 of them or something like this. Out of the
Oh, so
junkyard.
that's not bad.
Do it.
What kind of headlight did you put on yours, Bill?
What do you mean, what kind of headlight?
Did you put a different headlight than the one that Dylan has shown on his model?
No,
Okay.
no, I added armrest, sunshade, a bell and a whistle or a horn. And a lot of little hooks on the end of the end beams because Arkansas Lime loved hooks. And it's one of my favorite railroads, so. They ran Lincoln pin couplers to 2002, and I don't know why they did this, but they always hooked a chain between the cars and the between cars, even though they had Lincoln pin couplers holding it together. So I don't know.
Probably just
But
a
they
safety
do that
measure in
almost
case the link
constantly.
broke.
I guess.
Maybe they were
Yes.
really old pins.
Pardon me?
Yeah.
Maybe they were really old pins.
Could be. Could be. They
They
were
were
awesome.
belts and suspenders,
I
guys.
saw them unfortunately after they standard gauge, but they were very willing to for a rail fan to come out and visit them. They didn't care. Just don't go in the quarry.
Anybody have any more questions for Dylan?
Wouldn't the-
Well, Dylan, I certainly do appreciate you taking the time to do this tonight. It's been extremely interesting to me. I learned a lot from you tonight. I thank you so very much for doing this for us.
Hey, you're welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan.
So
Awesome.
next Wednesday, September the 30th at 7 o'clock. So next
Sorry,
Wednesday,
the back.
September the 30th at 7 p.m. Eastern. Dan Daugherty's going to join us as the featured modeler. Dan and his wife, Amy, published 2 magazines, S-Scale Resource and O-Scale Resource. And Dan is one fantastic modeler. He just amazes a lot of people in what he does and how he builds. So he'll join us next Wednesday, and hope you all will join us too. And thank you so much for being here this evening. See you then.